Hello, Mastertron Tamer here. In this video, I'm going to be explaining how my custom Christmas lights work. I've been asked about this one a couple of times, and finally getting around to making it. So they're hidden up under the eaves. It's pretty hard to see in this video because it's daylight, but they are tucked up under there, and they are actually on right now in this video. So the reason that I'm working on them this time is the very first lights that I put into my system were under the porch. And it was an experiment. I was learning how to do it. And I have decided that I want to change out those first ones and put in some replacements now that I've learned quite a bit about how pixels work and what I should use. So this is that first section. It's connected over on the right-hand side, your right. There's a connector that brings in the signal and the power. It then goes through the rest of the string and comes out over here on this side of it. From there, it gets fed up behind that drain that you can see there on the roof and goes up to the next section, which are part of the continuation. This little small part over here on the left that you can see flashing. It goes to that section. After the signal comes out of there, it then comes over here to the next section, which is over by the rain gutter, and heads up to the highest eave in the house. And the signal and the string keeps on going all the way up, as you can see here. And up to the top, and then comes down, and that's actually logically the end of the string. So I'm going to be changing out the ones under the porch. To do that, I'm going to be up on a ladder a lot, and it's not going to be safe to video in that position. So what I did is I made a little quick insert video here showing the procedure for removing the lights. I'll go ahead and play that. Alright, so I have some special pliers for these. As you can see, they just push right in. That one was already loose from me working with it earlier. But you get the idea. This one might be a little more stubborn because I didn't work with it before. But you get the idea. They go right in. Also wanted to kind of show you, you've got a good view here of kind of how this is mounted right under the eaves. So for the most part, it's out of most of the weather. If we go over here, we can get a close-up of the connector where it's plugged in. And that goes back to the controller. On the far side, there's another connector, and that's what goes off to the next string of lights. Okay, let's talk a little bit about how I manufactured this, and then I think we'll talk a little bit about pixels themselves because there's been a bit of confusion about how they work. So, first of all, the ones that I use, they mount into a 12mm hole. They're like a silicone material, and they go into a 12mm hole. So what I needed was a way to mount these on this side of the house. And this is what I came up with. So this is called J-channel, based on the shape. And this is used on the edge of siding on a home. That's what it's designed for. It butts up on the end, and the siding slides in here. Now this is vinyl, so it's pretty durable. It's also designed to be out in the weather, another big plus. Now it comes pre-molded in different colors, and with a little bit of searching around on the web, I was able to find one which near about was a perfect match for my paint color on the trim of my house, which would make it even more hard to see. So this is what I adapted to mount my pixels in. This is what you see under my eaves mounted up like that. It's just this material. It was shipped to me in about 8-foot lengths, so I would have to figure out how long a run I was doing and do quite a bit of measuring and figure out exactly. On a couple of them I needed more than one because the eave length was long, and that's really not a problem. Alright, so let's talk about how I put these holes in it. So to do that, I simply designed up a little drill jig. Here on this side, you see there's 2 holes in it, which are exactly 12 millimeters. And this is going to be really hard for you to see, but on this side, there is a little stub that sticks down a couple of millimeters to basically, and it's a 12 millimeter circle. And it sticks out this way. So the way this jig works is you go ahead and slide it on. Again, I make really careful measurements about where I want to start the first hole so it'll be even, so it'll be the same length on both sides. But anyways, after I do that, you can see how it just slides over. I would have already made a measuring mark with a pencil, so I knew exactly where I wanted to put the first hole. And then I would just go ahead and drill these holes. Now I would use a 12 millimeter brad point drill bit. Had to special order that. It was about $10, but it makes a nice clean hole. And we just drill it with a regular hand drill. Once I've gone ahead and drilled that, I can slide it down. It's got a little bit of a lip here it's getting into. And that's because it's designed that way. Come on, there we go. And I would just slide it down so that this little nub was poking into the last hole that was drilled. It's measured to be exactly the same distance as the other two. So slide it down, that then pokes into the last hole, drill the next 2, slide it down, this sticks into the last hole. And by the time I'm done, I've got perfectly spaced holes. I don't know, to do an 8-foot one took just a few minutes with the jig. So that was how I got those nice even holes that you see in the videos. Okay, so now I've got this on the side of the house with those holes. Now, I pre-assembled the ones I mounted on the house down on the ground level. I would go ahead and solder up and build up the connectors and all the rest, snap them into the J channel, and then go screw them up on the house. I'm doing a retrofit this time. I'm removing the old lights and moving in new lights, so that's why I went up earlier and I pulled down the old one, just snapped them out of the holes. I have a special pair of pliers, which you probably saw in that video, and they help put them in or take them out. And I did that because I'm changing it out. And to explain why I'm doing that, I need to talk to you a little bit about pixels. So that's the next part about this. So again, the pixels designed to pop into that 12 millimeter hole were originally designed to work on the huge Jumbotron electronic signs that you see at sporting arenas. And this is the configuration that they come in. Now this is in the trade of buying these. This is called a bullet light because of its shape. And they were done this way, so as you can see, they can be packed really densely. So the big Jumbotron sign has just got a whole bunch of 12 millimeter holes in it, and they snap into them. There have been some other configurations that have come out since then. Because these ones were typically in the electronic sign, they had a much smaller gauge wire. If I remember right, it's 24 gauge. So not great for long runs. And in fact, with these strings, you can only go about 2 strings long, and the voltage drop will be an issue. The ones that I switched over to later that I decided that I liked more look like this. They come in a more flat package. They have little tiny ears on here, but I don't even know that you could get a screw that size. But I guess the idea was they could surface mount that way. I mean, we're talking a 1 millimeter, 2 millimeter screw that would fit in that hole. Anyways, but they are designed more or less for surface mount. They have a longer spacing, which is better for Christmas lights because that's a little bit more natural spacing for what you would want. And they're available with wire that is much thicker. So these are 18 gauge. So they can go several strings long, and they won't have the same voltage drop that you would have with the 22 or 24 gauge ones that the other ones come in. They snap in exactly the same hole. So that part is great, and it's identical. I just happened to notice on this one, you can see some of my experiments. These are the custom-made gutter clips that I designed for these. I also put lights that aren't permanent. The ones I'm talking about now are the permanent lights, but these are ones I just put up for the season that hang on the gutters. And I made a custom clip for that and designed with this little device so I can go up and clip them up on the gutter without even needing a ladder. Anyway, so 2 different packages. That's your first choice. It's a matter of preference. These are more nearly closely spaced, so your lights will be closer together than this variety. Other than that, it's just convenience. They use more or less the same electronics. Okay, so let's talk about electronics, because that's the next part of this that you've got to understand, because there are some nuances to getting that part of this right. So there are 2 of these, and this is something I learned through experience. I want to be completely honest. The first ones I bought were these. Bought them off Amazon. They were easy to get. They were relatively cheap, and I was just trying to learn about them, to be quite honest, when I first started. Turns out that there are 2 types of circuits inside of these, regardless of which housing it comes in. It's not related to that. There's one that drops the voltage through resistors with something called a resistor dividing circuit, and there's some that use a solid state voltage regulator in them. And why does that matter? Well, they also come with 2 different voltage levels, both 5 volt and 12 volt. 5 volt is closer to the voltage that the lights actually operate at, but 12 volt is nicer because you can afford, particularly in an outdoor environment where the wire runs are long, you can afford to have a little bit of voltage drop across those long runs. It's not going to be the end of the world for your wires. So anyways, I went with 12 volts for that reason. So why am I telling you about that? Well, like I said, inside of these, and I will try and get you a little picture in there, what's in there is a couple of resistors that do that dropping of the power. They do that through heat. That's where the energy goes. It doesn't just disappear. People, I think, know the laws of that. So the heat is what gets rid of the excess energy when it drops it down in voltage through a voltage dividing circuit. Now, why that's an issue is, again, on a long run, you run into issues where you run into issues where that voltage drop can be a real issue. Particularly long runs, it wouldn't be uncommon for the voltage at the end of the string to drop down to about 8 volts. And what happens with these ones with the voltage dividing circuit that same division that worked great to take it from 12 volts to 5, which is what these operate at, if we start with 8 volts, that will then provide 3.3 volts to the circuit. And that's well below the threshold to where weird things start to happen, where it can't function right. The symptoms I've seen in the field is that the lights just kind of flash with no real purpose. It's just because the signal is all messed up that they're trying to work with. So we've lost a reliable signal. And I'll talk in a minute about how that signal works too. These ones, and like I said, you can get bullet ones that have this same feature. They have a solid state voltage regulator in it. So they provide the correct voltage through a switching circuit, which is a circuit which turns on and off really fast. And what that does is drops the voltage from whatever it is. I mean, it could be 14 volts, or it could be 8, or it could be 12. It doesn't matter. It drops it to the same 5 volts consistently. They tend to be a few pennies more a light, and I really do mean pennies. I don't even think it's a full dollar extra per light, but it makes a huge difference in performance. This is one of the things that I learned, that particularly, I guess there's just a lot of things you don't learn until you put something out in the field and try it. In the lab, and when I was testing out the lights, the voltage dividing circuit was just fine. Anyways, that is my preference, and that's why I'm switching these lights out. I'm going from a voltage dividing circuit to ones with regulators to make it more reliable. Because what I discovered was as the lights got brighter, because of that voltage dividing circuit, problems would start to happen with the signal. This one that I'm replacing is also sort of a hybrid, because it's the very first one I built is the one on the porch, and I used these. I then later started working with these, and that's what I put in the rest of the house. So the string that's up there now is actually feeding another string which is using regulators. This is typically not a good idea because of that difference in how they handle voltage that I was just talking about. So this is yet another reason to switch them out, and why I'll be doing that. All right. Before I talk about that, let's talk about another thing that's really important for you to know about. How does the signal get down this wire? Because a lot of the problems that you'll run into are related to that. So the lights I use a 3-wire signaling circuit. So there's a plus and a minus. That's typically a black or a blue and a white and a red in the wiring of the colors. And it's the 2 outside wires. One is the positive and one is the negative. In the middle is a signal wire that carries the signal from light to light. Now, how do these work? Because you could go hook these up to 12 volts, you can buy them wherever, and go, they don't light. Well, that's because they're individually addressable lights. They have to be sent a signal and turned on in order to do anything. And each one of these has got a special LED, which is actually 3 LEDs. It's 3 different colors inside of one LED housing. And each one of those LEDs, all 3 colors, is individually addressable. We can turn on the red one. We can turn on the blue one. And that's how they work. All right. So again, how does the signal work? Because like I said, there's a lot of confusion with this. First off, if you're brand new to this, you need a controller of some sort. People often homebrew these with an Arduino. If you happen to be a maker, and a lot of people have done that. There's also commercial controllers out there on the market. I went somewhere in the middle. I bought kits for my controllers from a company called Sand Devices. And I did kits because I like building kits. It's just fun and entertaining, and I always learn something from going that route. So I purchased two kits ultimately from them, an E682 and an E6804. And that's because we have a limited length of wire run. So it makes sense in many installations to have multiple small controllers closer to where the light strings are going to be, because we don't have an infinite length for how long we can carry this control signal between lights. Things get a little dicey after, well, it depends on the wire you're using and other things, but somewhere around 20 to 40 feet, things start to get weird and the signal doesn't repeat as well as it has. Okay, so what is the signal? Well, it's standard TTL logic for people who know anything about that. It's just a 5-volt on, 0 is off. And it sends out an array of bytes onto the wire. And that array of bytes, of what's in there are 510 bytes available for turning on LEDs. But if you're using standard LEDs, your string can only have 170 in the line that are addressable. And that's because there are 3 colors in here, and they're each addressable. So if we take our 510 and divide it out by 3, it comes up to 170. So if you're using standard lights, you have 170 that you can address on a single run. And again, the way that works is in that string or that byte array that it sends out, it's got 510 usable bytes. When that gets to the first light on your string, it takes that array and it takes off the first 3 bytes. It then passes it on to the next light without those 3 on it. So it grabs the next 3 bytes. And it keeps doing that down the string. By grabbing 3 bytes, dropping that off of the byte array so that the next one grabs the next 3 bytes, each one of these lights will get 3 bytes for controlling its 3 colors. And not too surprisingly, that gives us 256 light levels for each color. If that makes sense to people who know binary, well, it will make sense to people who know binary math. So that's what's going on. And it's really kind of a really cool idea that they came up with this as a protocol. Send out the 510, and then each light will pull off 3 and pass it on to the next. And off it goes to the races. Because of that, these are exceptionally important which direction the lights are wired up. Meaning coming from the controller, because one side is in and the other side is out. Now on the string, they're all oriented the right way, but you have to start from the correct part of the string. And again, I will try and get you some close-ups of these, because these actually have little arrows in the circuit board, so you can see which direction they go. This variety has a double-sided circuit board inside of it, and one side says in and the other side says out. But again, it's critically important that and just think of it, align the arrows so you're sending the signal out down to the next one. and you'll be fine when you wire them up. One more thing I wanted to introduce you to, and this is getting into a little deeper knowledge of getting these things to work. There's something called a null node, and that's what this is. If you were able to look inside of this and tear it all apart, you would find it's the same circuit board that's inside of these. The only difference is they didn't solder on the LED. You say, why would you want one without an LED on it? Well, null nodes are used for repeating the circuit. So when the run starts to get too long, that you're going to run into issues with picking up noise along the way, because you can see it's not shielded in any way, and it's also not twisted. So it will pick up noise. This is what limits you to, 40 feet or so, depending on a bunch of different factors. What's limiting you is that signal degradation along the wire. And it's not so much the signal strength being lost, although that can be an issue. It's more about picking up noise along the way and the signal not being able to be differentiated by the chip from the noise. So that starts to be an issue. Well, enter the null node to fix that problem. You can insert this on a long run midway in the string, and what will happen is it will come in with the signal and clean it up and regenerate it and send it back out. Really long runs, say 100 feet, you might have 2 null nodes in there. Now, null nodes mathematically work the same as these. That's why I wanted to mention that, because I've seen some issues about this on the discussion threads. They take up an address. In fact, they take up 3, just like these do. So when you're designing your software for controlling them or doing any of that, you have to take them into account. Because if I put a null node into this string, it's the one on the end of here is no longer the first one. This one is. And when you're trying to figure out which light is which, that makes a difference. Well, I think that that's the most important stuff that I wanted to explain this to you. I'm sure people will have questions. That's what comments are for. Please feel free to put some in there if you've got any. But like I said, if you're brand new, first of all, you need a controller of some sort that's going to send the signal to the lights to turn them on. Now, there are very simple controllers out there on the market which cost $10, which have some predefined patterns in them, and some even with remotes. There's nothing wrong with getting one of those when you're first starting and you're trying to figure out how to use these. And that's all you really need. But you do need a controller of some sort, always. But if you're going to be doing a more professional light show, you typically use fancier controllers. And the ones I'm using, they actually have a network interface. And I have them on a dedicated LAN just for controlling these lights so that it won't mess up the rest of my my internet traffic, because they send a lot of traffic. And then I control the controllers via software. And that's all there is to it for how this is all set up. Probably before Christmas I'll do a quick tutorial about the software that I use, because it's a freeware out there that you can use, and it'll do everything you need to do. So, but anyways, that's another video. So the next step in this, and I need to get all reset up, is I'm going to start building the actual string, and I'll be talking about the connectors I use and how I do the various things for that. I'll see you in that next video.